So, Tom, I really love this film. I've enjoyed watching some of it again just now. I mean, it's such a fascinating sort of a spotlight on something that, you know, most of us don't really know that much about. How did you first get interested in doing a film on this subject?
Well, I grew up loving movies and wanting to make them. And I had a friend in LA who was a casting director named Joanna Colbert, who was one of my executive producers. And she was working with Kate Lacey, another one of my producers, on a film called Step Up. They were casting it out of Disney in LA. And they both realized they had Marion Doherty in common. Kate was her last assistant in '99 when she was let go. And Joanna had interned for Juliet Taylor, who was Marion's first assistant. So they were like, oh, we should do something on Marion. And Joanna coincidentally was having coffee with me that day at the Coffee Bean in LA and said, hey, we could do something together. And I'm like, what? She's like, do you know who Marion Doherty is? And I said, no, I have no idea who that is. So, but I'll go back to New York and I'll read about her. And I scoured the internet for anything on Marion Doherty other than the IMDb listing. And all I found was one article, an interview with a student from the University of Oklahoma. It was a few pages long. It revealed a whole world to me. I think there's also a paragraph in Peter Biskind's book about Marion, Easy Rider, Breaking Bulls, how he had called her a one-woman revolution out of New York, one-woman casting revolution. So that was really all the information I had to go on. And then in '07, I did about a 10-hour interview with Marion, and that was the foundation of the movie.
And when you first got in touch with Marion, was she, receptive to the idea? Did she, was she open, and also to obviously opening her archives to you with the casting cards, the photographs, that kind of thing?
She was. I mean, when it comes to Marion, there's an entire tree of women who surround her, and it's kind of getting everyone involved, everyone to come out and be supportive. And Marion was, I think, almost right away very into the idea. And I remember sitting down on the couch with her, and I told her, I also really want to talk about the idea that you guys don't get an Oscar, and are you okay with that being a part of the film? And she was totally with it.
Yeah, I think probably the burning question on everyone's mind right now is, has Taylor Hackford seen this movie?
No, he hasn't. But I will say, Taylor's defense, because I actually respect him considerably for going on camera and saying what he said. He was very brave. But he said afterward, he goes, I know people are going to hate me for this, but this is really the way I feel, and there's a lot of other directors who feel that way and just wouldn't say it.
I'm going to turn it over to the press corps here, right in front. There's a floating microphone.
Anytime you're making a film that involves a compilation like this, sometimes I realize there are things you want to include you can't because you may get refused to clip. How do you go about assembling and getting permission to include all these clips from all these features so that you could make the film the way you wanted to make it?
And I'll just, for anyone who couldn't hear, repeat. The question is about obtaining all of the film clips that are in the film, and did that present any challenge?
Yeah, well, there are specific ways of using clips that allow you to claim fair use on the clip. One, the movie's historical, it's educational, and we use the clips very specifically to illustrate the points that we were making. We try not to use them in any real creative ways that would have been outside the realm of fair use. So I was very careful about that, and I've edited films in the past where I've learned how to do that. So it hadn't really been an issue in making the movie.
Yes.
Do you want to do that?
I don't think we have the mic.
So, when you had this core interview, but then you had to go back in and shape all this, and you didn't know that Marion was going to die. So how about the evolution, how you shape this and make decisions who to get, who not to get, and because you have such a body of people to draw on and stuff, that I can't imagine what you
It was pretty infinite. Yeah.
did to call it down.
The question about how the film developed from that initial interview with Marion, and how Tom decided who to include and who not to include.
Well, I interviewed 220 to 240 people for this. A lot. A lot of incredible people that I don't want to name right now, but you would be amazed I'd cut out of the film. There were an incredible plethora of stories, and it was really, really difficult to get it down. Our first cut was 2.5 hours. It kind of got away from Marion, got into Lynn, got into Fred Roos and other casting directors. And ultimately, I have an incredibly brilliant editor, Jill Schweitzer, who helped really ruthlessly shape this film. And you can imagine, it was a lot of arguing, and it was very difficult to get it to where it is now. And I remember defending it too, and I talked to Stephen Bowie, my researcher. I was like, Stephen, you have to find other documentaries that are over 2 hours, so we can prove that a documentary over 2 hours is marketable. I was convinced we'd never get it down, and through the magic of compression, it's actually 89 minutes, not 94 minutes.
Will some of that material that you didn't use surface down the road? Do you envision that being DVD supplements or some sort of online experience?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different uses, including historical and archival for the material.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Could you talk a little bit more about your wonderful editor and your process that you and she go through, Tom?
More about the editing process.
Yeah, I mean, I did the interviews, and then I would get transcribers to transcribe the interviews. I knew the basic path of the movie, so then I would highlight sections of the transcripts, and I would put them in, I would label them by topics, by sequences, and then we would start putting those sequences together, and they would be pretty massive. So one sequence I had, which was great, which was George Lucas, Richard Dreyfuss, Cindy Williams, and Fred Roos talking about the casting of American Graffiti. It was an amazing sequence. So, all these sequences became modules, and, we have hours and hours of these modules. Primal Fear. We interviewed Gabby Sidibe and Billy Hopkins about the casting of Precious. Really emotional, great screen test. And then it was, okay, let's make a movie out of this. And that became the difficult part. We just kept shaping and shaping. We edited for about 1.5 years, maybe a little more. Interviewed Marion in 2007, really started in 2010 doing all the interviews, about 240. And then kind of just finishing now. We just did the mix 2 weeks ago.
In the back, we now have the microphone.
In some of these interviews that you did focusing on Marion, what's fascinating is sort of the inner politics of choosing actors and actresses for these roles. What sort of things did you pick up with the other people that you interviewed who were doing films, in the past 20 years that may not have been included in what you showed in the film? In other words, their politics of choosing people with the directors in their casting director role for different films.
Wait, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, in other words, you showed a lot about, like the selection for Midnight Cowboy and other films. What did you get from the different people that you interviewed, the other casting directors, about other films that you may not have included in the edit that you did? With this
Other
film?
more contemporary films?
Yes, exactly. Like what sort of things you could share that you might have learned that you didn't see in this film about more recent films?
Well, I think overall, the thing I learned is how important the casting director was to the creative process. That there is no director without a casting director. And it's funny, I was at Sundance 1.5 years ago and staying at this condo, and this guy said to me, "Oh, you're doing a doc on casting directors. You should also talk about how little they do on the film and how, I do all the casting myself. And they're mostly worthless." I'm like, oh my God, between that and interviewing Taylor Actor, I'm like, what is going on? Because having met and interviewed Marion Doherty and Lynn Stallmaster, you don't think a casting director is worthless. So, but beyond that, it's not just about them. There are casting directors working today who are absolutely as talented as Marion and Lynn are, but absolutely don't get their due. And, they push the studios every day to cast the right people in the part. And sometimes they win, like in Midnight Cowboy, and sometimes they don't win, and I won't name names on that. But Marion in the late 90s was being told to put certain actors in films that she felt were absolutely not right for those films. And you can go to IMDb and maybe see what those films are. But and it's not that those are bad actors, it's that in the parts they were put in, they were just absolutely wrong for the parts. But the corporate decision makers didn't care. They don't understand what it means, or they don't understand how to make a movie. And it's pretty infuriating.
Yes, all the way in the back in the other corner. Or, no, we have one here first? Okay, and then there.
Hey there, it's a fabulous film. You create a marvelous bookend that a profession that started dealing with superficiality goes through this wonderful period and ends up with the superficial. What does your crystal ball tell you about what happens next?
I think it's interesting. I think we're back to kind of where live TV was, because I think the internet is fracturing things all over again. And pretty soon, corporate media, I think, won't be able to control the content that's being created. We're not there yet. What I found fascinating about Marion was that she started in 1949, about the year that television became a mass medium. And she went all the way through to about 1999, 2000, where the internet started becoming dominant as a way of consuming media. So I thought that was really fascinating that she charted that entire path from start to finish. So to me, in a way, she's a metaphor of mass media.
There's someone in the back asking, sir.
Did not have time to go into, and that is how Marion and people that she encouraged and nurtured were about women. And they reached out without anything knowing to women in other branches of the industry. They would, if they heard of another woman in another branch of the industry that was talented and kind of special, that woman would get a phone call just out of the blue. Hi, I'm Alex Gordon. I just wanted to say hello. And I think that whole, I think part of why they didn't get the recognition, why a lot of things happen, is because they're women.
Yeah, I didn't want to hit that over the head, but I have a feeling you all got that, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly female. And the directors are mostly male. You know, to me, Taylor is the male ego.
Did the issue of the stereotypical casting couch come up, or the pressure on casting directors to put people in films that they didn't want to put in?
Well, it's funny about the casting couch. The one article I found on Marion was actually, the title was, "My Casting Couch is Too Short." And of course, that's the cliche. And whenever I say I'm doing a documentary on casting, the first thing people they'll make a joke about the casting couch. So I stayed as far away from the idea of the casting couch as possible. I mean, of course it exists in Hollywood, but as Fred Roos told me, it's like the stakes are too high that somebody thinks they can sleep with somebody and get a part. Not that it doesn't happen, of course it does, but it doesn't define the role of the casting director.
It's also a film about actors in a way that we don't normally. It's also a film about actors in a way that we don't normally see actors being modest and grateful, except when they're playing that part. So I wanted to know how you sort of balanced out the director's point of view, the casting person's point of view, and the actor's point of view.
It was not easy, because every story you heard contradicted everyone else's story. So, as you know, as journalists, it's all rational. And there were some politics in some of the sequences in getting the story right, so everybody believed that's the way it was and would support the stories being told. So, this thing has been through the ringer in that regard. Did I answer your question? I will say that they were all extremely, they went on camera because they loved this woman. John Travolta and Jeff Bridges loved Lynn. I faxed Jeff Bridges, thought I'd never hear from him again, and 2 weeks later, he calls me. "Hey, it's Jeff Bridges, how you doing? What are you up to? How's Lynn?" So they really, really care for these people. It's amazing.
Yes. Just wait for the microphone, please.
I think one of the interesting things about the film is that it breaks down this idea that you really have to know somebody to get into anything. I mean, it's almost as if the film has life beyond your subject of casting, that it's overturning very old ideas about how things get done. And so I'm wondering, were you going for that consciously?